I woke up, as usual, at 7:30 in the morning. Outside my bedroom window on the second floor of the hotel, dawn was slowly breaking over the mountains surrounding our little town of San Miguel de los Andes. 30 years ago, when my late husband Alberto bought this old mansion and turned it into a hotel, I thought we were too far from civilization. Now it seemed like a blessing, no big city hustle and bustle. Just a quiet life where every day was like the last. I put on my robe and went downstairs to the lobby. Our hotel wasn't luxurious, just 20 rooms, but each was furnished with love and attention to detail. Alberto had always said that hospitality wasn't about gilding, but about making one feel at home. I continued to follow his principles even after he passed away 5 years ago. The walls of the hall were decorated with pictures of our town in different seasons, and in the corner stood an old piano on which Alberto sometimes played for guests in the evenings. It was silent now, I didn't have a musical ear, and hiring a pianist seemed unnecessary. Domitila was waiting for me in the hall. She had come to work for us while her husband was still alive. She was 35 then and had just divorced her drunken husband. Alberto gave her a job and a small room in the basement of the hotel, where she lived for the first few years until she could rent her own place. Within 10 years, she had become not just a housekeeper, but his right-hand woman. Domitila was a practical woman, with hard features and her hair always neatly slicked back. She never wasted words and could assess a situation with a single glance. She had her own principles and oddities. For example, she hated it when guests left dirty dishes in the rooms and could spend half an hour reprimanding the maids for an improperly made bed. "Good morning, Señora Esperanza," she said, holding up her to-do list for the day. "Last night we had guests in room 14, a couple from Santiago staying for 3 days. He's some kind of engineer, she's a teacher, very polite. There's a leaky faucet in the bathroom in room 8. I've already called Manuel the plumber. He'll be here after breakfast." I nodded, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the thermos that Domitila always had ready for me when I woke up. The coffee was strong, with a slight bitterness, just the way I liked it. She'd memorized my preferences during my first week on the job, and she'd never made a mistake since. "What about the linens?" I asked, looking at the notes in my notebook. "The supplier promised last week." "The supplier promised to deliver today by lunchtime. He says there was a mix-up with orders in the warehouse. Also need to resolve issue with heating in first-floor rooms. The boiler is working, but not at full capacity. I think we need to call a master from the capital. Our local Pedro can't find the problem for the 3rd time." "How much will it cost?" "About 200,000 pesos. But if we don't fix it now, we'll have to replace the whole boiler by winter, and that's $1.5 million. Domitila always spoke in numbers. She kept the hotel's financial records and knew every peso of our income and expenses. Sometimes I thought she understood our business better than I did. We went around the hotel room by room. I checked on the girls cleaning the rooms. Carmen, the head maid, had been working for us for 7 years. She was a mother of 4 children and took her job with special responsibility. Every peso was important to her family. The youngest maid, Rosita, had joined us 6 months ago. She was only 18 and still learning how to properly make beds and clean bathrooms, but she was doing her best. "Rosita, the linens should be tucked in at the corners," I explained, showing her how to tuck the sheets in properly. "The guests must not see carelessness." "Yes, Señora Esperanza," she nodded, watching me carefully. There was indeed a leaky faucet in room 8. I looked around the bathroom. Not only was the faucet the problem, but the sealant around the tub was starting to peel. We'll have to do some repairs. "Domitila, add it to the list. Buy some sealant and have Manuel renew the seams in the bathroom at the same time," I said, making a note in my notebook. I went down to the restaurant and talked to Carlos, the cook, about tomorrow's menu. Carlos had been working for us for 15 years, since Alberto's days. He was a master of traditional Chilean cuisine and prided himself on using only local products. His empanadas were the best in town, and his fish dishes attracted guests even from neighboring towns. "Tomorrow they are bringing fresh trout from the mountain lake," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "I think we should make it a special menu of the day." "That's a good idea. What about the meat?" "There's beef, but it's not very good. I'd rather do a chicken dish with vegetables. I have a new recipe with herbs." We discussed the menu for the next few days, food prices, plans for the weekend when a group of tourists from Argentina were expected to arrive. Carlos was a reliable man, but he loved to talk. He could talk for half an hour about one recipe, spicing the story with stories of where he learned to make a particular dish. After talking to the chef, I looked around the lobby and the restaurant. One chair in the lobby needed to be replaced. The upholstery was frayed and it was ruining the overall look. In the restaurant, the walls needed to be painted. During the winter, the paint had peeled in places due to humidity. All these little things required attention and money, but they created the overall impression of the hotel. Everything was in order, as always. Domitila made sure that the hotel was perfectly clean and orderly. Sometimes I felt like she loved the place more than I did myself. For me, the hotel was a memory of Alberto, a dream we had together that I continued to pursue alone. For Domitila, it was home, work, the meaning of life. She had no family. After her divorce, she never remarried, no children. She channeled all her maternal instinct into taking care of the hotel and me. "Señora Esperanza," she said when we had finished our rounds, "maybe you should take a vacation. Go somewhere. Visit Señorita Paloma?" I paused, adjusting a vase of flowers on the front desk. They were fresh roses from the garden. Alberto had planted rose bushes outside the hotel when it opened. Each week I cut the prettiest flowers and placed them in the lobby. Domitila was the only one who allowed herself to give me such advice. Over the years, she had witnessed all my joys and sorrows and knew more about my relationship with my daughter than anyone else. "Paloma is busy with her own affairs," I answered with restraint. "She has her own life in the capital." "But she's your daughter," Domitila insisted, and there was genuine concern in her voice. "When was the last time she came to visit?" I wondered. Paloma's last visit was at Christmas, almost 6 months ago. She stayed only 2 days, constantly on the phone with some people in her art circles, seemed impatient and distracted. We didn't even talk much. She was always in a hurry, discussing something, making plans. Before she left, she hugged me goodbye, but there was no warmth in that embrace, more of an obligation than a desire. I remember standing on the doorstep of the hotel and watching the cab take her to the bus station. She didn't even turn around to wave. "She's an artist," I said, more to myself than to Domitila. "She has exhibitions, projects. Not everyone can drop everything and go to the middle of nowhere." "But you're her mother. Doesn't she care at all about how you live?" "She knows I'm fine. The hotel is running. My health is good. Why else would she care?" Domitila was silent, but I could see the sympathy in her eyes. She was the mother of 3 children, but she'd given them to her ex-husband after the divorce, when she couldn't support them on her own. The children were grown, all of them had families of their own, and they visited her regularly, even though they had moved away to different cities. Every weekend, one of them came to visit her with her grandchildren. Domitila never complained about being alone, but I knew it was hard for her sometimes. The day went by with the usual business. The linen supplier arrived. He brought good quality sets, but the color was a little lighter than ordered. I had to accept the goods, because there was no place to return them. The next delivery was only a month away. The plumber Manuel fixed the faucet, but warned me that all the plumbing in the rooms on the first floor would have to be replaced soon. The pipes were old, metal, starting to rust from the inside. I met with a vegetable supplier who brought potatoes and carrots for the kitchen. Prices had increased by almost 20% compared to last month, due to supply problems caused by the rains in neighboring provinces. We had to recalculate the cost of dishes on the restaurant menu. After lunch, a group of tourists from Germany arrived, an elderly couple who had been traveling in South America for the 3rd month. They were very polite and took lots of pictures. They loved our mountain scenery and the old architecture of the hotel. The husband spoke Spanish with a strong accent but tried very hard. The wife just smiled and nodded. I checked the accounts and paid the bills. Income was good this month, but expenses were rising too. I had to plan renovations, buy new equipment, give raises to the staff. They all worked honestly and deserved more. By evening, I was so tired I could barely stay on my feet, but there was one more meeting I couldn't cancel. At 7 in the evening, I arrived at the Los Amigos Cafe in the main town square. This had been my and Remedios's meeting place every Friday for many years now. The tradition started when Alberto was alive. Remedios and I had been friends since our high school days, but because of family matters and work, we rarely saw each other. After my husband's death, these Friday meetings became an island of stability for me in a changed life. Remedios was my complete opposite. Where I was tall and slender, she was short and full. Where I had sharp features and a serious expression, she had a soft, round face and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Where I preferred to keep my emotions to myself, she was open and emotional. Maybe that's why our friendship lasted so long. We complemented each other. Remedios worked as an elementary school teacher at a local school until her retirement 3 years ago. During her 40 years of work, hundreds of children passed through her class, and many of them still come to visit her and bring their children. She was one of those teachers who is remembered for a lifetime. Now she was tending to her small garden, reading all the books she hadn't had time for during her years of work, and helping her daughter with her grandchildren. Remedios was already sitting at our usual table by the window, sipping herbal tea. She always came in 10 minutes early and ordered chamomile tea. She said it calmed her nerves after the work week. Though what nerves she might have had in retirement, I didn't understand. "How are things at the hotel?" she asked when I sat down across from her. "I saw some tourists arriving today." "Germans. Very nice. The usual," I replied, ordering myself a mint tea. "Guests come and go. Business is good, but expenses are growing faster than income. How's your health? You don't work too much?" "I feel fine." Domitilla helps. I couldn't do it without her. We talked about business, about the weather, about the fact that an old bakery in town is closing down. The owner is selling the business and moving to the capital with his children. Then the conversation turned to more personal topics. "How's Paloma? Did she call this week?" Remedios asked, and I could hear the caution in her voice. I shook my head. Remedios knew about my daughter's relationship with me. I told her about my worries in those rare moments when I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. Remedios had never openly criticized Paloma, but I could see that she disapproved of my daughter's indifference. She was too tactful for direct rebuke, but her silence spoke more than words. "You know," I said, stirring the sugar in my tea, "sometimes I think I've lost her. Not physically, of course, but lost her as a daughter." "What do you mean?" "When Alberto died, she came to the funeral, stayed for a week, helped with the paperwork, and then she just, disappeared. She calls once a month, asks how I'm doing, tells me about her exhibitions. But there's no intimacy between us, as if we were acquaintances, not mother and daughter." Remedios listened attentively, nodding from time to time. She was a good listener. Years of working with children must have taught her that. "Maybe it's because she blames you for not moving to the capital after Alberto died," she suggested cautiously. I remember her talking about it at the wake. I remembered that conversation. Paloma had insisted that I should sell the hotel and move in with her. She said that at my age there was no point in sitting in the middle of nowhere, that I should live life to the fullest. I explained that the hotel wasn't just a business, it was a memory of my father, a dream we had together. She got angry then and said I was choosing dead memories over a living daughter. Maybe. She said that at my age there was no point in sitting in the middle of nowhere, that I should live life to the fullest. But what is a full life? For me, the hotel isn't just a business. It's a memory of Alberto. It's my home. And for her, it's a reminder that her childhood was spent in a small town, away from the big opportunities. I thought about my friend's words. Paloma had always dreamed of the big city, of fame, of recognition. At school, she drew all the time, in class, at home, on the street. She participated in all art competitions, dreaming of art school in the capital. When she turned 18, she left to study in Santiago and never returned. Only for vacations, and even then not all of them. Even then, at the institute, she started to drift away from us. "Do you know what upset me the most?" I continued. "I miss her. The real Paloma, who was a little girl. She was so affectionate, always coming to me when she was sick. Told me everything that happened at school, showed me her drawings. And now I don't even know what's really going on in her life." "Tell me something good about her," Remedios asked softly. "About the time when you were close." I smiled, remembering. When she was 10, she decided to paint a portrait of our family for Alberto's birthday present. She drew it secretly in her room for weeks. And when she showed it to me, Alberto and I were so huge, and she was so small between us. But the most touching thing was that she drew hearts over us, as if we were all flying in clouds of love. Alberto cried when he saw that drawing. She was a happy child. Yes, and talented. I remember when she was 15, she drew our hotel, so beautiful we hung it in the lobby. Guests always asked who the author was. She was so proud when we told her it was our daughter. And now she has success in the capital? I don't know. She talks about exhibitions, about projects, but I don't understand how serious it is. Does she make a living out of it? Is she happy? Does she have friends? How's her relationship with her husband? She's not talking about it. Maybe you should try talking to her frankly. Tell her how you feel. I've tried. Last time was Christmas. But she'd just change the subject or start talking about her own business. It's like she's afraid of intimacy. Or afraid of disappointing you. The thought was new to me. Maybe Paloma avoided frank conversations not out of indifference but out of fear? But what could she be afraid of? We sat in the cafe until late afternoon. Remedios talked about her grandchildren, who were to visit her for the weekend. The youngest was 5 years old, the eldest 8. She cooked special meals for them, bought toys, read them stories. Her face lit up when she talked about them. Then she talked about a new book she was reading, a novel by a Chilean writer about a woman who, at 50, started a new life. Maybe you should start something new too, she suggested. Take a course, find a hobby, meet someone? At my age? I laughed. And where here in our town can you find a suitable man? Age is not an obstacle, and a man doesn't have to be from here. There is the internet, there are acquaintances in other cities. I shook my head. After Alberto died, I hadn't thought about other men. We'd been good together for 28 years, and no one could replace him. And what was the point of starting a relationship at my age? I listened to my friend, but my thoughts were far away. At home, I went to bed with a heavy heart, as I had been doing more and more often lately. Outside the window, the wind was blowing in the mountains, and the sound reminded me of my childhood, when I used to fall asleep in my parents' house to the same mountain wind. Lying in the dark, I thought about how my life had become too predictable. Every day is the same. The hotel, the errands, the evening with Remedios on Fridays, the occasional phone call with Paloma. Maybe my daughter was right in saying I was burrowing into this small town. But what was there to do? Sell the hotel and move to the capital? Live near a daughter who clearly didn't want my presence in her life? Or find some compromise I couldn't think of yet? As I fell asleep, I imagined how nice it would be if Paloma called tomorrow and said, "Mom, I miss you. Come and visit me." But I knew that wouldn't happen. My daughter was too proud and independent to admit that she needed her mother. The phone rang Tuesday morning as I was checking the electric bill in my office. The call was unexpected. Paloma usually called on Sundays, and not every week. When I saw her number on the screen, I felt my heart beat faster. Was something wrong? "Mom, hi." My daughter's voice sounded cheerful, too cheerful for 10 in the morning. "How are you?" "I'm fine, dear. How are you?" "You're not sick?" "No, I'm not. Listen, I'm calling on business. My birthday's coming up, remember?" Of course I remember. June 22nd, 2 weeks from today, 30 years. I was already thinking about what to get, although it wasn't very convenient to send a parcel to the capital. The post office was slow, and courier services were expensive. I remember, of course. 30 years, a solid date. Exactly. That's why I've decided to throw a real party, and I want to invite you. I froze, holding the phone to my ear. Paloma invited me? The last time was, I can't even remember when. She didn't invite me to her high school graduation, saying the ceremony would be boring. For my wedding 3 years ago, Alberto and I did come, but it was more of an obligation than a desire. "Mom, can you hear me?" Yes, I can. It's just, pleasantly unexpected. Of course I'll be there." "Oh, great. The party is Saturday the 22nd. We'll start at 7 p.m. at our place." I did a quick calculation in my mind. Saturday was exactly 12 days away. I had to plan a trip, buy a gift, think about an outfit. I rarely traveled to the capital city. The last time was a year and a half ago, when I had to settle matters with the bank. How many guests will there be? 30 people. Maybe more. Mostly my friends from the art world. Fernando's colleagues from the advertising agency. It'll be fun, I promise. 30 people. I tried to visualize Paloma's apartment. The last time I'd been there, it hadn't seemed very big. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen. How could 30 people fit in there? Isn't that too much for your apartment? No, it's fine. You can go out on the balcony in the summer if it gets crowded. And I'm also planning a small exhibition of my new work, right at home, in the living room. I want to show my friends what I've been working on for the last few months. There was an excitement in Paloma's voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. She spoke quickly, jumping from topic to topic, and I could sense that she was really excited about the party. What time is the best time to come, and for how many days? Come Friday night so we can have a quiet chat before the party, and you can leave Sunday or Monday, whatever you want. Okay. What can I get you? You've got everything. Mom, don't think about it. The important thing is that you're coming. I've wanted to have a real party for so long, to introduce you to my friends. It makes me feel warm. So Paloma wants me to be part of her life after all. Maybe our relationship can be repaired. Okay, honey. I'll definitely come. That's great. I'll be waiting for you. I'll send you the address and train times soon. Kisses. She hung up, and I sat in the chair with the phone in my hand for a few more minutes. Paloma invited me to her birthday party. She wants me to meet her friends. For the first time in a long time, I felt something change between us. Domitila came into the office with last week's expense report, but when she saw my face, she stopped. Is something wrong, Mrs. Esperanza? Paloma called. She invited me to her birthday party in the capital. Oh. Domitila couldn't hide her surprise. That's good. When do you want to go? Friday. I'll have to organize things here. Can you manage alone for the weekend? Sure. We don't have many guests this week. Carlos can handle the kitchen. The maids know what they're doing. I nodded. Domitila really could run a hotel as well as I could. Over the years, she'd learned the ins and outs of our business. I spent the rest of the day thinking about my upcoming trip. There was a lot to think about and prepare. On Wednesday evening, as usual, I went to Remedios's house. We sometimes met at her house when the weather was bad or when we wanted to talk in a quieter environment. Remedios lived in a small house near the school where she used to work. The house was old but cozy, with a small garden where she grew vegetables and flowers. The rooms were filled with books, and on the walls hung children's drawings, gifts from former students. Paloma invited me to her birthday party, I said as soon as I stepped through the door. Really? Remedios put aside the book she was reading. Tell me more about it. We settled in the kitchen over cups of tea, and I recounted the morning's conversation with my daughter. She said she wanted me to meet her friends, and there's going to be an exhibition of her work right at home. That's wonderful, Esperanza. See? And you were worried you were estranged. Yes, but now I have another problem. I don't know what to get her, and I have no idea what to wear. Her friends are artists, creative people, and I'm a provincial hotel owner. Stop belittling yourself. You have excellent taste and you're a smart, educated woman. As for the gift, think about what would be good for her art. I've been thinking. When Paloma was little, I always gave her something related to drawing, paints, brushes, albums, but now she's an adult artist and she probably has all the professional materials. Maybe something memorable? Remedios suggested. Or a piece of jewelry? I don't know. Her tastes have changed. She used to like simple things, but now... Remember those earrings she wore at Christmas? Those weird asymmetrical ones? Modern art. Remedios laughed. But a gift doesn't have to reflect her artistic preferences. Give something from the heart. What about clothes? It's not like I can come in my usual dress. Her friends must be wearing something special. You have that black dress you bought for your niece's wedding. Very elegant. But that was 3 years ago. Maybe it's out of style by now. Classics never go out of style. And if you want something new, go to the district center tomorrow. There are good stores there. We sat up late into the evening discussing the details of the trip. Remedios was thrilled that Paloma had finally invited me, and her enthusiasm was transferred to me. Indeed, it was a good sign. Maybe the daughter had grown up and realized that family ties were important. The next day, I drove to Los Angeles, the nearest major city an hour away. There was a mall there with several nice clothing stores. I hadn't been there in a while and was surprised at how things had changed. There were new boutiques, cafes, even a small movie theater. In the women's clothing store, I was helped by a saleswoman, a girl of about 25, very stylish and friendly. "Do you need something for a special occasion?" she asked, seeing my confusion in front of the window. "Yes, for my daughter's birthday. A party in the capital, there will be artists and creative people." "I see. Then we need something elegant but not too formal. Maybe with an interesting detail." She showed me a few dresses. One was too bright, one was too youthful. But I liked the third one, dark blue, knee-length, with a nice collar and discreet trim. The fabric was of good quality, and the cut suited my figure. "It suits you very well," the saleswoman approved. "And the color accentuates your eyes perfectly." The dress cost more than I had planned to spend, but it looked really good. I decided to buy it. After all, my daughter's 30th birthday is a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. The gift was more difficult. I went to several stores, but I couldn't find anything suitable. Jewelry seemed too banal, books, inappropriate, items for the home, practical but not festive. Finally, in a small antique shop, I found what I was looking for. It was a vintage jewelry box made of dark wood with mother-of-pearl inlay. It wasn't new, but it was in excellent condition and had an interesting story. The seller told me that the jewelry box belonged to a French ballerina who lived in Chile in the 50s. "Is your daughter a creative person?" asked the elderly shopkeeper. "Then this piece will suit her. It has a soul, a story." The box was expensive but beautiful and unusual. Just what an artist needs. I bought it, and the seller beautifully wrapped the purchase in antique paper. Back home, I showed the purchase to Domitila. She approved of both the dress and the gift. "Señorita Paloma will be pleased," she said. "The box is very beautiful." "I hope so. I'm still nervous. It's been a long time since I've been in such company." "You'll manage. Just be yourself." Friday came quickly. I packed a small suitcase, left detailed instructions for Domitila in case of problems, and went to the bus station. I had bought a ticket to the capital in advance, for the evening bus, which arrived in Santiago at 10:30. On the way on the bus, I thought about what the party would be like. Artists are special, creative people. They would probably talk about things I didn't know about. Art, exhibitions, fashion trends. Will I be able to keep the conversation going? Would I seem like a stupid hick? But then I remembered Domitila's words. The main thing is to be yourself. After all, Paloma grew up in our small town with our values and traditions. She can't completely deny her past. As the bus pulled up to the capital, I felt a mixture of excitement and joy. For the first time in a long time, Paloma herself had invited me into her life. It was a chance to mend our relationship, to grow closer. I hoped it would go well. The bus arrived in the capital a little late, at 10 in the evening instead of 10:30. I gathered my things and walked slowly out onto the platform of the bus station. Santiago greeted me with noise, bright lights of advertising and crowds of people rushing in different directions. After the quiet of our small town, this chaos always seemed overwhelming to me. Paloma was to meet me near the main entrance. I walked through the waiting room, dragging a small suitcase on wheels behind me, and went outside. The air was different here, heavy with exhaust and dust, not at all like the clean mountain air back home. I stood looking around for a few minutes, but I didn't see my daughter. Finally, I spotted her near the parking lot. Paloma was talking on the phone, gesturing with her free hand. She looked very dignified, wearing skinny jeans, a fancy jacket, and high boots. Her hair was in a sloppy bun, with some strands poking out of it. Even from the back, she looked like someone who belonged in this town. I stepped closer and heard scraps of conversation. "No, red wine has to be Chilean. No Argentine, that's the principle. Yes, I realize it's more expensive, but it's my birthday tomorrow. Not budgeting." She turned and saw me. Her face changed at once. A smile appeared, though a bit strained. "Mom?" She quickly ended the conversation and came over to me. "Sorry, organizational issues. How was your trip?" "Fine, just a little late." She hugged me, and I could smell her perfume, Something modern, sharp, not like the light scents she'd favored when she was younger. There was warmth in the embrace, but also a certain rush, as if she were performing a necessary ritual. "You look good," I said, pulling away and looking at my daughter. She did look good, though a little tired. There were faint shadows under her eyes, and there was a sense of tension in her movements. "Thank you. You too. Let's go to the car. I'm parked quite close by." We reached a small red car that looked rather shabby. Paloma opened the trunk and helped me load my suitcase. "Fernando's car," she explained, seeing the look in my eyes. "Mine's been in the shop for 3 weeks. They can't find parts." We got into the car and Paloma started the engine. It was running with a distinctive sound that said that the car had been in need of serious repair for a long time. "How are things at the hotel?" she asked as we pulled out of the parking lot and onto the busy street. "It's fine. Domitila stayed in charge. She'll be fine. How about you? Getting ready for the party tomorrow night?" "Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Food, drinks. I have to clean the apartment and hang the paintings for the exhibition. Fernando's helping, but he's got work too." On the way, Paloma talked about her plans for tomorrow. She wanted to turn the living room into an impromptu gallery, hanging her latest works. Many guests were expected: artists, critics, employees of the advertising agency where Fernando worked. "Where am I going to live?" I asked when we stopped at a stoplight. Paloma was silent for a few seconds, and I felt that she was a little embarrassed. "You know, Mom, I booked you a room in a hotel near our house. It's very nice, clean, breakfast included." "A hotel?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Why not at your house?" "Well, you know, the house is such a mess right now with the party preparations. Pictures everywhere, boxes of dishes, wires from the equipment. You're going to be uncomfortable. The hotel's quiet. No one's bothering you." I looked at my daughter's profile in the streetlight. She didn't turn her head in my direction, staring intently at the road. But I sensed that wasn't the whole truth. Was the house really so cramped that it couldn't accommodate a birth mother? Or are there other reasons? "Sure, if that's what you think," I said, trying not to show disappointment. "It's definitely better this way. The hotel's just a 5-minute walk away. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning and we'll spend the day together." The hotel Paloma brought me to was quite decent, small but modern, with a neat lobby and courteous staff. She quickly checked me in, paid for my room, and walked me to the elevator. "Get some rest, Mom. I'll meet you in the lobby tomorrow morning at 10, okay? I'll need to get some things for the party." "Okay. Why don't you come to my place now, have a cup of tea, talk to me?" "I'm sorry, but I have a lot to do. Fernando's waiting, and it's late. We'll talk tomorrow." She kissed me on the cheek and left. I went up to the room and sat on the bed. The room wasn't bad, clean with all the amenities, but very impersonal. It was exactly like the rooms in thousands of hotels around the world. No warmth, no coziness. I unpacked, showered, and went to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the dark and thought about why Paloma didn't take me home with her. Was she ashamed of me in front of her husband? Or does she just not want me to see how they live? Maybe they have some problems she doesn't want to talk about. I woke up early this morning, 7 o'clock. The habit of getting up at the crack of dawn never left me, even on vacation. I had breakfast in the hotel restaurant. The buffet was not bad, but I missed the homemade coffee that Domitila made. At 10 in the morning, Paloma actually came to pick me up. She looked more rested than yesterday and was wearing a brightly colored dress with an unusual print. "Had a good night's sleep?" she asked. "Is the room okay?" "Yeah, it's fine. Where are we going?" "First to the market for groceries, then to the liquor store. We also need to buy flowers to decorate the apartment." We left the hotel and walked through the streets of the neighborhood where Paloma lived. It was an old part of town with narrow streets and houses from the beginning of the last century. Lots of little cafes, art galleries, stores with vintage clothes. The atmosphere was bohemian, creative, not at all like the downtown business districts. "Do you like the neighborhood?" Paloma asked, noticing that I was looking at the neighborhood with interest. "Yes, it's very distinctive. Do a lot of artists live here?" "A lot. The rent is not very high and there are several galleries nearby, convenient for those in the art business. The market was a real eye-opener. I was used to our small provincial market where all the vendors knew each other and the selection of products was limited. Here there were stalls with exotic fruits that I had only seen in pictures, cheeses from different countries, spices whose names told me nothing. Paloma walked confidently between the rows, choosing food for the party. She bought olives of different varieties, several kinds of cheese, jamin, vegetables for salads. I followed her, carrying the bags and watching. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to a strange green fruit on one of the counters. "Avocados. Very trendy right now. All my friends love them. You can try it tomorrow." "Is it expensive?" "Not really. The prices here are normal, not like the supermarkets downtown. But I've seen the price tags and I've done the math. What was normal prices for Pelham was quite expensive for me. One piece of cheese cost as much as I spent on groceries in our town in a whole day." At the liquor store, Paloma spent a long time choosing wine. She read labels, consulted with the salesman, tasted several varieties. I stood next to her and felt out of place. There was only one store in our town that sold alcohol, and the selection was limited to 3 or 4 brands of local wine. "Mom, what do you like, red or white?" Paloma asked. "I rarely drink wine, sometimes a glass of red on holidays." "Then I'll take a good red so you can appreciate it, and sparkling wine for the toast." She bought 6 bottles of different wines, and I was horrified at the amount the salesman quoted. But Paloma paid without hesitation, as if it were an ordinary bread purchase. The last stop was a flower store. Here Paloma chose long and carefully. She wanted white roses for the living room, but also pink peonies for the kitchen and some exotic orchids for the bedroom. It's your birthday tomorrow, not your wedding," I couldn't help but comment, looking at the number of flowers. "Mom, this is important to me. I want everything to be beautiful. My friends are used to a certain level." There was a certain defensiveness in her voice, as if she was making excuses for her spending. I realized it was best not to comment further. When we got back to Paloma's house, our hands were full of bags and bouquets. She stopped at the entrance of an old 4-story building with a beautiful facade. "This is our house," she said. "Do you want to come in and see how the preparations are going?" "Sure." We went up to the 3rd floor. Paloma opened the apartment door, and I could see that she hadn't exaggerated about the mess. There were boxes in the hallway, and in the living room there were paintings lying on the floor against the walls. Furniture had been moved to make room. "Hi, Mom," came a voice from the kitchen, and Fernando appeared. My son-in-law looked tired and a little annoyed. He was dressed in an old t-shirt and paint-stained jeans. He had a screwdriver in his hands. "Hi, Fernando, how's it going?" Just trying to put up some extra lighting for the paintings. It's not working out so well." "Mom's going to look at the apartment and then I'll take her back to the hotel," Paloma said as she unloaded the bags on the kitchen table. I walked around the apartment, looking at the furnishings. It was obvious that Paloma and Fernando had organized their home tastefully, but without spending a lot of money. The furniture was simple but functional. Lots of books, paintings on the walls, plants on the windowsills. The atmosphere is creative but a little chaotic. "It's cozy," I said sincerely. "Thank you. True, now it's a mess, but tomorrow everything will be beautiful." Paloma showed me her new work, a few abstract paintings in bright colors. I didn't know much about modern art, but I could see that my daughter put a lot of emotion and energy into her work. "Very interesting," I said, although to be honest, I didn't understand what exactly was depicted on the canvases. "This is my new series, Urban Rhythms. I'm trying to convey the energy of the big city through color and form." We talked a little more about her art, then Paloma looked at her watch. "Mom, I have a lot to do before tomorrow. Why don't I take you to the hotel and we'll call tonight?" "Of course, darling. I don't want to interfere with your preparations." On the way back to the hotel, Paloma was a little distracted. She was thinking about tomorrow's party, making plans, sometimes saying something out loud, addressing herself rather than me. "I have to remember to buy ice and candles for the cake, and Fernando will set the music." I was silent, staring out the window at the streets of the capital passing by. All day, I'd had the strange feeling that I was an extra. Paloma was polite and attentive, but there was an invisible wall between us. She lived her own life, full of worries and plans that had no place for me. On Saturday, I woke up at 7:30 as usual. Outside the hotel window, the morning city was noisy, cars honking, voices of passers-by, a jackhammer working somewhere. I was used to the silence of our town, where the loudest sound in the morning was the singing of birds and the occasional passing truck. After breakfast at the hotel restaurant, I went back to my room and spent a long time choosing what to wear. A new dark blue dress hung in my closet, and every time I looked at it, I felt excited. Tonight was Paloma's birthday, and I hoped that the evening would go well, that we could finally have a heart-to-heart talk, that her friends would accept me. Paloma was supposed to drop by at 2:00 in the afternoon. Time dragged slowly. I tried to read the book I had brought with me, but I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept coming back to the upcoming party. What if her friends only talk about things I don't know about? What if I seemed like a boring hick? At 2:30, I started to get ready. I put on my new dress. It fit really well and made me look younger. I did a little makeup and styled my hair. In the mirror, I looked like a presentable woman who shouldn't be ashamed of her appearance. Paloma arrived exactly at 2. She looked excited and happy. She was wearing a spectacular black dress with gold trim, her hair loose and styled in waves. She had obviously spent a lot of time getting ready. "Mom, you look wonderful," she said, hugging me. "The dress really suits you." "Thank you, darling. And you look beautiful. Happy birthday." I handed her a beautifully wrapped vintage box. Paloma unwrapped the gift and gasped. "What a beauty! Where did you find it?" "At an antique shop in Los Angeles. The seller said it belonged to a French ballerina." "It's amazing! Thank you, Mom. It's just what I need for jewelry." She seemed genuinely happy about the gift, and that made me happy. Maybe I'm not so bad at picking out her tastes. "Let's go home," Paloma said, locking the box in the car. On the way, she talked about the guests who were coming. There would be Cristobal, he's a curator at a contemporary art gallery, a very influential man. And Violetta is an art critic who writes for major magazines, a few other artists from our group, Fernando's colleagues. All in all, an interesting bunch. I nodded, remembering the names, though I knew I was unlikely to remember them all. When we got up to the apartment, there were already 10 people there. The music was playing softly, and people were standing in groups, talking and holding glasses of wine. The apartment was transformed. Palome's paintings were beautifully hung on the walls with additional lighting. Bouquets of flowers were everywhere. Beautiful appetizers were spread on the table. "Everyone, meet my mom," announced Paloma when we entered the living room. Several people approached me. The first was a woman of about 35 with short hair and bright lipstick. "Violetta Morales," she introduced herself, extending her hand. "Paloma has told me a lot about you. Esperanza Valdemar, nice to meet you." "Do you also do art?" Violetta asked. "No, I run a hotel in the mountains, a family business." "How interesting. It must be a different world from the capital." There was no condescension in her tone, and I felt a little more confident. Then I was introduced to Cristobal, a tall man with a beard and unusually shaped glasses. He was polite, but I felt he was assessing me with his gaze like a work of art. "Paloma told me you were from San Miguel de los Andes," he said. "Beautiful places. I drove by there once." "Yes, the mountains there are wonderful. Do you travel around the province a lot?" "Sometimes in search of new talent. Provincial artists often create something very authentic." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an implicit criticism. Gradually, the apartment filled with people. Couples and companies came in. Everyone was greeting each other, hugging, laughing. It was obvious that this was a circle of close acquaintances who met often. I stood to the side, holding a glass of white wine that Fernando had poured for me, and watched. The conversations were mostly about exhibitions, new art projects, galleries. Names of people I had never heard of were mentioned, places I had never been. From time to time, one of the guests came up to me and made polite conversation, but then quickly switched to more interesting interlocutors. Paloma was the center of attention. She took the guests to her paintings, explained the concept of her new series, and accepted congratulations. She was glowing with happiness and had already had several glasses of wine. I could see her getting louder, more expansive in her gestures. "Mom, come here." She called me over to a group of young people who were discussing one of her paintings. "Tell them how I used to paint as a child." I walked over feeling awkward under the stares of strangers. "Paloma has always been talented," I said carefully. "Even at school, everyone recognized her ability. Can you imagine, in our backwater, we didn't even have a normal art school?" Paloma laughed. "I had to learn everything myself from books. There was something dismissive in the word backwoods that prickled me, but I didn't say anything." "But it must be quiet and peaceful for your creativity," one of the young men said. "There is silence, but there is no creativity." Paloma waved her hand. "Life stops there. Everyone is only thinking about their petty affairs." I felt myself blushing. Does my daughter really think so about our city, about the people she grew up among? The evening continued. The guests ate, drank, and danced to the music Fernando had put on. Paloma became more and more relaxed. She laughed loudly, hugged her friends, told some stories. I tried to stay out of the way, not to interfere with her celebration. At 11 p.m., the cake was brought in. A beautiful cake, ordered from an expensive confectionery. Everyone gathered in the living room singing "Cumpleaños Feliz." Paloma blew out the candles. When they started cutting the cake, I came closer. "Did you make a wish?" I asked my daughter. "Of course." She put her arm around my shoulders. "Thanks for coming, Mom. I really did." At that moment, I felt warm, close. Maybe things were getting better between us after all. But then the guests broke up into groups again, and I was once again on the sidelines. I stood near the window, looked at the nightlights of the city, and listened to scraps of conversation. They talked about politics, about new movies, about vacation plans. I had nothing to add to these conversations. Around midnight, I decided to find Paloma and say goodbye. I had to go home early tomorrow morning, and the party looked like it would last until dawn. I walked around the apartment looking for my daughter. I found her in the kitchen, where she was standing with a glass of red wine, surrounded by 4 or 5 of her friends. They were chatting merrily about something, and Paloma was clearly under the influence of alcohol. Cheeks ruddy, eyes shining, movements more abrupt. "No, of course I'm glad she came," Paloma said as I approached. "But honestly, I only invited her out of pity." I froze in the kitchen doorway. Was she really talking about me? "Why pity?" one of my friends asked. "Yes, you see, the old lady has gone completely wild in her backwater. She sits there with her hotel, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't communicate with anyone. I felt sorry for her. I think, let at least once a year, I'll bring a man into society." My friends laughed. Someone said, "You're a good daughter, Paloma." "What kind of good?" continued Paloma, not noticing that I am standing in the doorway. "It's just a guilty conscience. Can you imagine she still thinks that we are close to her? She calls me, asking me what I'm doing, and every time I want to say, 'Mom, we have different worlds, understand it at last.'" "And why do not you say?" asked a red-haired girl in a bright dress. "How could you tell her? She will be upset. She'll think I'm an ungrateful daughter. I'd rather invite her to a party once a year to show her that I remember her." "But she's your mother," one of her friends said timidly. "So what?" Paloma shrugged her shoulders. "We are completely different people. She lives in her little world with the hotel, I, in the real world. She has no education, taste, understanding of modern art. What are we going to talk about?" My daughter's words hit me like punches. I stood there, unable to move. All these years I thought that we just distanced, that it takes time and patience to restore intimacy. And it turns out Paloma thinks I'm a burden, pities me like a stray dog. "And remember how she came to your wedding in that awful dress?" laughed the redhead. "I thought it was some distant aunt." "Don't remind me." Paloma covered her face with her hands, but a smile shone through her fingers. "I was so embarrassed back then. It's good that Fernando is understanding, doesn't judge my background." "But now you're the one who defines who you are," her friend encouraged. "You don't depend on your provincial past." "Exactly," Paloma raised her glass. "To the fact that we can choose our family." They clinked glasses, and I realized I couldn't listen to any more of this. My legs were shaking and my throat was dry. I quietly backed away from the kitchen and walked toward the exit. I ran into Fernando in the hallway. He was carrying plates of dirty dishes and looked tired. "Esperanza, are you leaving already?" "Yes, it's late. Thank you for your hospitality." "Wait, I'll tell Paloma." "No need," I said quickly. "She's busy with her guests. Tell her thank you for a lovely evening." Fernando looked at me carefully. Perhaps he suspected something in my tone or expression. "Are you sure you don't want to say goodbye to her?" "Yes, I am. Goodbye, Fernando." I took my purse and left the apartment. The stairs were quiet, with only the sound of music and laughter coming from behind the door. I walked slowly downstairs, went outside and stopped. Where to go? To the hotel? But there I would be alone with my thoughts, and thinking right now was painful. I walked down the night streets of the neighborhood. It wasn't very late for the capital cafes and bars were still open. People were walking on the sidewalks. But I couldn't see anything around me. I could hear Palome's words in my head. I invited her only out of pity. The old woman is feral. Different worlds. So all these years I'd been fooling myself. I thought that my daughter was just busy with her life, that she would grow up, and we would become close again. And she just put up with me out of a sense of duty, pity, embarrassed. I sat down on a bench in a small public garden and cried. Tears rolled down my cheeks, smearing my mascara. It was good that it was dark and no one could see. I cried for a long time, from pain, from humiliation, from disappointment. I lost my daughter without realizing it. When the tears were over, I took out my phone and called a cab to the hotel. The cab driver, an older man, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Is everything all right, Senora?" "Yes, thank you, just tired." At the hotel, I went up to my room, took off my party dress, and hung it in my closet. I won't have to wear it again. I took a shower, washed off the rest of my makeup, and went to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. I lay there and replayed the whole evening in my head, all the words I'd heard. The most painful part was realizing that Paloma was right. We really had become strangers. We have different values, different interests, different ideas about what's important in life. I was living with the memories of the time when we were close, and she had long since given that up. In the morning, I got up early, packed my bags, and went down to the lobby. At the front desk, I left a note for Paloma. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. Had to leave early. Kisses, Mom." The bus home left at 9 in the morning. I bought a ticket and sat by the window. As the bus drove out of town, I looked at the streets whizzing by and thought about how I would never come here again. Never again will I impose on a daughter who doesn't want me. 4 hours later, I was home in my small town in my hotel. Domitilla greeted me with surprise. "So early? How was the party?" "Fine," I lied. "I was just tired of the capital." I went up to my room, changed into my usual home clothes, and sat by the window. The familiar mountains that Paloma had called the backwoods were visible behind the glass. Maybe she was right. Maybe I really had gone feral in my little world. But it was my world, my choice. And now I had to live in it alone, without illusions of filial love. I spent Monday in bed. I told Domitilla that I had caught a cold in the capital and asked her not to disturb me unless absolutely necessary. She brought me tea with honey and lemon, but did not ask me about the trip. She must have realized from my look that something had happened. I lay there staring at the ceiling. My thoughts were jumbled, but one thing was clear. I didn't want to be a burden to my daughter anymore. If Paloma thinks I am a pathetic creature to be tolerated out of a sense of duty, then I will relieve her of that burden. Tuesday morning, I got up and went down to my office. I took out a file from the safe, the will I'd made 3 years ago after Alberto's death. Back then, I'd given everything to my daughter, the hotel, bank accounts, personal effects. It seemed natural to hand over the family business to an only child. Now these documents made me bitter. Paloma will receive the inheritance and will probably sell the hotel right away. For her, it's just money, not the memory of years of work, not the house in which Alberto and I had invested our souls. I called the notary in the district center and asked for an appointment. "Mrs. Valdemar, of course. When would it be convenient for you to come?" "Today, if possible. I need to amend my will." "Okay, I'll expect you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." I told Domitilla I was going into town on business and asked her to keep an eye on the hotel. She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. The notary, Ricardo Muñoz, was an elderly man who had handled our family's affairs since Alberto was alive. He met me in his office, a small room filled with files and books. "What brings you to me, Señora Esperanza?" he asked, offering me a chair. "I want to change my will, to exclude my daughter from it." The notary raised his eyebrows. He had known our family for years and remembered little Paloma. "It's a serious decision. May I ask why?" "Our lives have taken different paths. I don't want to leave an inheritance to a man who doesn't appreciate it." "I see. And to whom do you want to leave the estate?" "I've been thinking. I had almost no relatives, just a few distant cousins with whom we had no contact. Domitilla was loyal, but bequeathing her a multi-million-dollar inheritance seemed wrong. It could ruin her life." "Are there any charitable organizations in our area? Children's homes or anything like that?" "Yes, of course. A foundation for children from single-parent families, a nursing home in a neighboring town, a shelter for homeless animals. A children's foundation is fine. Let the money go towards the education of children who otherwise wouldn't be able to study." The notary took notes in silence. Then he raised his head and looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Esperanza, are you sure? Such decisions are hard to reverse. Maybe we should think about it some more." "I've been thinking all week. The decision is final." "Good. Then let's make a new will." The procedure took about an hour. We were meticulous about all the details: the hotel with all the property, bank accounts, personal effects. Everything went to the children's charity. The only things I left to Paloma were her childhood drawings and photographs, which I kept with me. "When do you want to notify your daughter of the changes?" the notary asked. "Today. Send her an official notice. We can do it tomorrow morning. She'll have the document by lunchtime. I signed all the papers and paid for the services." On the way home, I felt strangely relieved. Paloma would no longer have to put up with me over the inheritance. Now she was free of any obligation. At home, I had dinner alone. Domitilla had gone to her room, leaving soup on the stove. I ate without appetite, thinking that tomorrow my daughter will know about my decision. How will she react? Probably angry. But maybe she'd be relieved. I wouldn't have to pretend daughterly love anymore. I didn't sleep well. I woke up several times and couldn't fall asleep again for a long time. In the morning, I finally woke up at 5 o'clock and didn't sleep again. The phone rang at 12:30 in the afternoon. I was just checking the laundry in the laundry room when Domitilla came running in with the receiver. "Mrs. Esperanza, there's an urgent phone call for you. Mrs. Paloma is on the phone." I picked up the phone, already knowing what the conversation would be about. "Mom!" Paloma's voice sounded harsh and angry. "What the hell did they send me?" "Hi, Paloma. What are you talking about? Don't pretend. The will! You cut me out of the will!" "Yes, I did. How could you?" She was yelling so loud, I pulled the phone away from my ear. "Are you out of your mind?" "Paloma, calm down. Let's talk calmly." "What calm? You disinherited me. You gave it all to some stranger's kids. This is crazy." I heard a man's voice saying something in the background. Fernando must have been outraged too. "Daughter, I'd like to explain." "Explain? There's nothing to explain. You're taking revenge on me for something. For living in the capital? For not coming to your backwater every week?" The word backwater hurt my ears. That's what she said about our town at the party. "It's not about where you live. Then what is it? Tell me straight why you did this to me." "Paloma, on Saturday at your birthday party, I overheard you talking to your friends." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then the daughter's voice became quieter, but no less angry. "What did you overhear? That you only invited me out of pity, that I'm an old woman who went wild in the backwoods, that you were ashamed of me." "Mom, I was drunk. I was talking nonsense. Drunk people tell the truth, Paloma. You told your friends that we live in different worlds, that I have no education and taste, that you're ashamed of my origins. That's not true. That's not what I meant. No, daughter, and you know what? You were right. We really are different people, and I don't want to be a burden to you anymore." "What burden? You're my mother." "The mother you put up with out of a sense of duty. A mother you're ashamed of in front of your friends. Now you're free of that burden." A man's voice, louder and more aggressive. "Esperanza, it's Fernando. Put me through." Are you out of your mind? How can you disinherit your only daughter because of drunken words? Fernando, it's none of your business. How is it none of my business? I'm Paloma's husband. This hotel should be ours by right. You don't have the right to dispose of the family property any way you want. Yes, I do. It's my property, and I'll dispose of it as I see fit. We're going to sue, Fernando shouted. We'll contest the will. We'll prove you weren't in your right mind. Try it. The notary will certify that I was fully competent. Paloma answered the phone again. Mom, please. Now there were tears in her voice. I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just words. I want it back the way it was. No, Paloma, words have consequences. But you love me. I'm your only daughter. I do, but loving and leaving an inheritance are different things. An inheritance should go to someone who values it. And I don't. This is a family business. You called our town a backwater. You said I had no taste and no education. How can you appreciate something created in a backwater by a man with no taste? Mom, why do you take it this way? I was drunk and wanted to show off to my friends. So you showed off by humiliating your own mother. That says a lot. But we can fix this. I'll come over and we'll talk. No, daughter. The decision's been made. Live your life in your own world. No more pretending to love your provincial mother. You're cruel, Paloma screamed again. Heartless! How can you do this to your own child? A native child wouldn't embarrass his mother in front of strangers. We won't forget this, Fernando intervened. You will sit in your hotel alone and die alone. You will have no one. I never had anyone, I replied calmly. I just know it now. You'll regret it, he shouted. When you're old and sick, there will be no one to take care of you. I'll be looked after by the people I pay my salary to. More honest than pretending to be an inheritance. Paloma picked up the phone again. Mom, please. I admit I was wrong. I'll apologize. Just give me back the will. Paloma, if you had apologized before you knew about the will, I would have believed you. Now it's just to get money. It's not about the money. What is it about? It's that you're my mother, and I love you. People you love don't humiliate in public. They're not embarrassed. They don't invite you in out of pity. I will never do that again, I promise. It's too late, daughter. Trust is like crystal. Once broken, it doesn't stick. So you'll never change your mind? Never. There was a long pause. Then Paloma spoke softly, but with venom in her voice. Then know this. You chose loneliness. Don't expect any calls, letters, or visits from us. Live with your charity kids. Maybe they'll be more grateful than your own daughter. That's what I'm counting on. Goodbye, Mom. Forever. Goodbye, Paloma. I hung up the phone and stood in my office. Domitila peeked through the door. Everything all right, Mrs. Esperanza? Yes, just dealing with a family matter. She nodded and left. I sat down in the chair and closed my eyes. It was painful, but it was easy at the same time. No more deluding myself that there was intimacy between us. No more waiting for phone calls and wondering if my daughter loved me. Now I knew the truth. After my conversation with Paloma, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the wall where a photograph of the hotel's grand opening 30 years ago hung. In the picture, Alberto and I stood in front of the entrance, holding a symbolic key. Next to it was little Paloma in a white dress, smiling and proud that her parents had created something important and beautiful. Then I stood up and slowly walked around the hotel. In the lobby, the maid Rosita was dusting the furniture. When she saw me, she smiled and said hello. I nodded back and walked on. I went up to the second floor, where the best rooms were located. The 14th was occupied by a couple from Santiago, the same nice people Domitila had told me about on the first day of my return. I could hear them talking quietly as they planned tomorrow's route on the mountain trails. I stopped at a window at the end of the hallway. From here, I had a view of our entire town, the red-tiled roofs, the church bell tower, the square with the fountain, the mountains on the horizon. Alberto had specifically chosen this building because of the view. He said guests should wake up and fall asleep with the beauty outside the window. Walking back downstairs, I went into the restaurant. Carlos was preparing dinner, trout that had been brought in from the mountain lake that morning. He was working intently, oblivious to my presence. For 30 years he had created his own little culinary empire here, knew the tastes of the regular guests, experimented with new recipes. All these people, Domitila, Carlos, the maids, the gardener, they became part of the hotel, part of the world Alberto and I had built, but after my death, the new owners from the charitable foundation will probably sell the building. Who needs a small provincial hotel when you can get the money and invest it in more profitable projects? Carlos will lose his job. Domitila, too. All those people who made the hotel their home will be forced to find a new place, and the building will be turned into something else, maybe an apartment building or an office. The pictures on the walls would disappear, the piano in the corner of the lobby, the rose bushes at the entrance. I went out into the garden and sat on a bench Alberto had placed under an old chestnut tree. From here, I could see the whole hotel, the windows, the restaurant terrace, the little fountain we'd installed 5 years ago. All this was created with love, with the thought that someday it will pass to my daughter, and then to my grandchildren. But I won't have grandchildren. Paloma is too busy with her art, her career, and after today's conversation, I won't know if she'll have any. So the Valdemar family will end with me. No one will remember that people who loved this place and put their soul into it once lived here. Domitila came out of the hotel and approached me. Senora Esperanza, dinner is ready. Would you like to eat? Thank you, but I have no appetite. She sat down next to me on a bench and we were silent for a while, looking at the mountains. Did something happen to Señorita Paloma? Domitila asked cautiously. Something that should have happened a long time ago. Domitila nodded. She was a wise woman and understood without too much explanation. And the hotel? She asked. What will happen to the hotel? It will remain in operation as long as I live. And then, we'll see. I didn't tell her about the will. It was my secret, my decision, the consequences of which I had to live with. When it got dark, I went back to my room. I took a box of family photos out of the closet and spread them out on the bed. Here was Paloma at 5 years old, drawing with paints on the terrace. Here she is in her school uniform before the 1st of September. Here's the graduation, the wedding. In the last photos, the daughter's face was already different, more aloof, less sincere. Apparently the alienation had begun before I realized it. I put the photos back in the box. Tomorrow, I'll write a letter to the notary to give them to Paloma, along with her childhood drawings. That's all that's left of our family. It'll be enough. Outside the window, the night wind rustled the chestnuts, and the sound reminded me of all the years I had lived here. The hotel was falling asleep. The windows in the rooms were going out. The voices were fading. I went to bed too, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day, new worries, new guests. Life goes on as long as it goes on, and what will happen later, it doesn't matter anymore.